Hey, what's up, cash flow creators? All right, I'm just gonna say, excuse me, before we even begin this conversation about Charlie Clerk, I want to send my condolences to his wife, his family, on both sides, and his kids. It's sad when anyone has to pass away from violence. And we all know we live in this world, especially in the United States, where there's a ton of violence. And I don't even know what the hell people are talking about. I hear some of these people doing videos like myself who are talking about they can't believe, what are we doing in this country? This country's falling apart. And these are people that have traveled the world, some of them. And I'm saying to myself, I haven't traveled that much, but I know the United States has always been known as one of the most violent nations on earth. Whether that's a side effect for so much freedom we have or whatever, who knows? But the bottom line is, the United States has always been known for violence. So to me, I don't know, maybe it's because it's my history of being growing up black in America that that's not been a surprise to me. Because that's what this country was founded on. And on the backs of black people. And that's just the way that it is, whether we like it or not. But that's not what this conversation is about. I really want to share with you my thoughts, and you don't have to agree with me, as to the reasons or the reason why Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And I believe it was due to racism. And here's what I mean by this. In order to understand that racism is an economic thing and not a racial thing. And I know that sounds like, what the heck are you talking about, Ben? What do you mean it's not a racial thing? Of course, racism is racial. Not the way most people think. Did the fact that you had some people, meaning white people, who treated black people bad because of the color of their skin in this country, did that happen? Does that happen? Sure. Yeah, it does. But just bear with me for a minute. That is prejudice, bigotry. That's not racism. And unfortunately, our system has taught people that the racism is the color of my skin because it falls in line, right? It's race. Someone's race, their culture, there's culture wars and all this stuff going on. But I tell people 1,000 times, they're using that stuff to divide us. It's okay to talk about those things, to understand them and educate yourself, to be educated about those things. But they should bring you closer together, not dividing you. So you got to ask yourself, how come they're dividing us instead of bringing us closer together, right? So here's my thoughts on this because we're all about cash flow here, right? Creating cash flow. So check this out. All right, let's go back in history for, you know, slavery time. What was the reason why the white Europeans, went and got slaves from Africa? Was it because of the color of their skin? No. It's because they saw their physical and mental capabilities and what they could do for them. That's what they call capitalism, extreme capitalism, no doubt. But that's what you're capitalizing on someone else or something else over somebody else, right? So they devised a plan They brought them over here for what? For free labor. That sounds like because of color of someone's skin. So they got this free labor. Now they have the manpower and the woman power to take over the country or the wealth of the country. It's as simple as that. And then when the North said, hey, the liberals against conservatives, listen, that ain't working for our country anymore because you got all the wealth and we have none. And the industrial age is coming on. So we got to break up this little monopoly you have in this country. So that's what they did. And guess what? John Wilkes put a bullet in the head of Abraham Lincoln. Why did he do that? He did that because Lincoln was black, like some people say he was. But let's just say he's white. They did it because it meant money and power. It's as simple as that. So now the North's breaking up the South's monopoly. South ain't gonna be too happy about that. It's like I tell my friends, this war is still going on today. These people think it's about black and white and all this stuff and everything. I'm not saying there's not people out there who don't think that way. That's not what I'm saying. What it's really about is money and power, cash flow. Grow up. You see, because unfortunately, what's happened in our country, all this rhetoric from our leaders, starting with our leaders, all the way from the president all the way down, they've turned it into this culture thing. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why would they turn it into this culture thing? And unfortunately, you had someone like Kirk, excuse me, who ideology fit that ideology. That blacks are just lazy, incompetent, and need to stop being that way. Right? Because that's pretty much what was the mentality, or was the mentality of a lot of these extreme conservatives. That anybody, whether it's blacks or anybody who's not like them, need to get their shit together and stop feeling sorry for themselves, right? And then you have the liberals who are extremist liberals, who think just in the opposite direction, to the extreme the other way. That's a problem. Because that means both are crazy. You see? And thank God is the few on both sides in this country. You ain't doesn't seem that way right now. Oh, this world will be destroyed by now. See, because it's narcissistic thinking on both ends. The liberals think things like, hey, it's okay to have men in women's sports, MMA fighting, whatever. And then conservatives think it's no problem that blacks have been marginalized in this country in the past and get over it. Neither one work. But it all comes down to money and power. And I'm going to try to give you a little context around that because I'm not saying that those things like women in sports or abortion, those things are not important, but those things are just the trees. They're not the forest. And unfortunately, when you have an intelligent young man like Kirk, 31 years old, I think he was a high school dropout too. But he wrote books and became a millionaire and took off from there. And he bought into the conservative party and all that to the extreme thinkings. And see, when you get into those extreme thinkings, you're gonna have people who love you, and you're gonna have people who absolutely hate you, who are gonna think you're evil. Excuse me. See, both can be true at the same time. So all this narrative about President Trump and a lot of these other people, oh, he was trying to bring the country together and trying to um, encourage debates and all that stuff. That's not what that was about. If you believe that, that's fine. But just the fact that his tagline with his company Turning Point was prove me wrong should tell you a little bit about his energy. Because it wasn't, I'm wrong, I'm right. And you prove me wrong that I'm right. When you take that approach with people, guess what you're going to attract? See, I'm a firm believer in the power of attraction. And this is what I tell you guys all the time when it comes to building wealth. You have to be it and think it before you can have it. You can't think wealthy later on. I was having a conversation with my wife about this. And I says, do you know the minute you buy something like Bitcoin, in my opinion, you're wealthy. She's like, what do you mean I'm wealthy? What do you mean? So someone bought, say, $100 worth of Bitcoin. They're wealthy. How can they be wealthy? It's only $100. And I said to her, that doesn't mean they can't be wealthier, but they're wealthy as soon as they do that. And why? Because it maintains its value. Just like if you bought a diamond, because it's rare. Anything rare and no one can control, especially Bitcoin, it's valuable. It's wealth. See, and if you don't start thinking that way and you want to build wealth, you can forget it. You ain't building wealth. So if you want to think that it's the liberals that killed Kirk or it was the conservatives' fault, you've already lost. Okay? Because getting back to when I talk about when this country was founded with slavery, once the North was able to break up the monopoly that the South had, obviously they killed their wealth. They undermined their wealth, I'll say. Because most of that wealth went to the stock market. But the conservatives got very paranoid and fearful because they worried now it's broken up and we've imported all these black slaves, these black people to this country. They're outnumbering us. They could take over, or fear that we would. They could take over, and they're going to do the same thing to us that we did to them. Because that's how narcissists think. So here's another lesson for you when it comes to what racism really is. I know what they tell you what racism is on TV, like I said, and internet and all that stuff, and in schools. But here's what real racism is. If you want to build wealth, take it or leave it. So they were paranoid, like I said. So what did they do? They put a call out to Europe and said, Europe, come over here. These people over here, because they were suffering over there. They had disease, there wasn't much going on there. They couldn't find work, they had nothing. They were living terribly. So they had nothing to lose. And they said, we'll give you free land, there's gold, there's resources, all kinds of stuff in this country. And it was a very rich country they discovered. So these people made their way over. And that was the whole story they tell you about the Statue of Liberty, right? It represents all the immigrants coming over, all European immigrants. Well, they wanted to tip the scales back in their favor. So there'll be more white people over here. Because we can't have these black people taking over, we treated badly. Because we need to maintain what? Economic power. It wasn't, well, we just hate black people and we're going to keep them in chains and now they're running loose and we just don't want to do it. It's about money and power. So all these Europeans came racing over here. Got all the land, got a resource, all kind of stuff. And they were just hoping the blacks were going to just die off. Because we ain't giving them anything. But what they didn't plan on was the blacks knew how to survive. We're survivors. We've always been. Not just people who look for people to take care of. Listen, blacks have earned everything that they've got in this country isn't much. But they've earned everything they've gotten. They've had to pay for everything they've got. So all this narrative about welfare, all this stuff and everything, they get up their asses, all stuff and everything. Because I ain't telling you there ain't no lazy black people in the country. But black people as a whole, that's like saying every white person is a racist or white supremacist. Every black person as a whole, most are not lazy, like everybody else. Trying to make their way in life, take care of their family, feed the kids, put a roof over their heads, put some money in their pockets. Okay? You can believe what you want to believe. But when you do that type of stuff, it creates a problem. Okay, so now you're putting people in a position where they got to do whatever they have. You ever been in a position where you had to do whatever you had to do to make it happen, or you weren't going to eat, or you weren't going to keep a roof over your head? So that started from the beginning for blacks. So we had to deal with all that, but we did. We had many successes. I'm sure some of you heard of Black Wall Street. Okay. There was many successful black business down south. So how do we get to this place? Well, once again, when you stigmatize people and you're the majority, and the people stigmatize the minority, there's a lot of leverage. There's going to be maintained for years and years. And this is where we move into the times of the black codes and the Jim Crow laws and civil rights movement with Martin Luther King and all that stuff, fighting for equality, right? And even Martin Luther King, MLK, he bought into the whole black-white narrative on some level. You know, it was about equality, just treating people better, not based on the color of the skin, right? But the content of their character. Well, that sounds good, right? But once again, it was never about that to begin with. And I'm going to prove it to you here. All right? So let me see, what should I start with first? I think, yeah, we're going to start with, Martin Luther King and to prove my point. Okay? Because the reason why it's relevant with Charlie Kirk was killed for pretty much the same stupid reasons that MLK was killed for on some level. The problem with Kirk, he bought into a lot of the rhetoric. See, he got started young. He was indoctrinated into this whole extreme conservative movement where black people and others, there's something wrong with them, basically. And that's the energy that he put out there. And like we talked about, the power of attraction. It's a real thing because whatever you focus on, you grow. Okay? You grow. And he is the unfortunate, perfect example of that by being assassinated. And here's the deal. The things that he was saying made a lot of people love him. The conservatives loved him. And like I said before, I'm not a Democrat Republican. I don't vote. And this is why I don't vote. Because these people who run this country, in my opinion, don't represent the best of us. These people are extremists. And they're extremely narcissist on both sides. And if anybody understands what narcissism is, narcissists don't care whether they're doing the right or the wrong thing. They just care about winning. And a lot of times at all costs. That's why if you prove a point, most of your prisons, they're filled up with narcissists. And those narcissists are there because they've caused harm to other people. And usually those other people, you know who they are? They're empaths. They're people on the other end who excuse everything. So you got these two extreme opposing forces. And if you don't know, everything in life has an off and an on, day and night, up and down. So they both play off of each other and they're extremists. And these are the people we have running this country right now. Okay. That's why you got some who think that it's okay for women to be or men to be in women's sports. And then you got some who just think that the cause of so much abortion is just people being irresponsible. And they should go to hell for it. See, those extremist thoughts. I don't know if you've ever been around extremist thinking people, but who are narcissists, good luck having a relationship with them. Because unless you agree with them, guess what? You're going to end up like Charlie Kirk, dead in a lot of cases. And that's what happened to him. And he attracted that. People want to say, oh, it wasn't his fault. You know, these people, he's trying to bring people together. No, he wasn't. If you're going to be honest about it, he wasn't trying to bring people together. I know people were saying that, but we're here to have an honest conversation, okay, with our cash flow channel here. And that honest conversation, if you don't think so, just think about his movement. It's called Turning Point. And his tagline, what was his tagline? Prove me wrong. It wasn't, let's have a conversation. It was, prove me wrong. That sound like someone who's not a narcissist? Who's not an extremist? That's how narcissists think. Prove me wrong. And when people would speak to him, he was a smart guy. Very intelligent. He can give quick, snap answer. He studied all that stuff. Lost mind of someone like me. In a lot of way, I can tell you that. And that's oldest base. Conservatives, they love that. That rigid thinking. Nope. Like I watched him doing the debate. I think it was the black guy. And he was talking about how who is killing black people. And the black dude was like talking about the police, da da da. Da. He said, "Oh, that's what's killing all the black kids in the hood." And we both know that it's black kids killing black kids in the neighborhood. Who doesn't know that? But see, Nazis, because they're so smart, it's also the blessing and the curse. Because the blessing is they can form good sentences, they can explain things, they sound intelligent, and answer questions correctly on a test. But see, that ain't the real world. See, he thought being smart was the real world. And he could only see the trees. Yes, it's just black kids killing black kids. But he couldn't see the forest. He wasn't going to ask the question, and the kid, the black gentleman, did not have the intelligence enough to answer back properly. And of course, they're going to edit videos and do videos that are going to make the person who's challenging him look weaker than what he is. It's the whole game. It's the whole setup that he had. It was pretty slick the way he did it. Prove me wrong. Then he gets out there, da 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 da, hitting him up, da da, and then people look stupid on camera and hoping it's young kids too. Okay, younger than him in a lot of cases. And ate him for lunch. Charlie, he's our hero. Yeah, conservative. He's that guy for us. He knows what we're talking about. He was a good speaker. I connect with people. Okay. But like I said, he couldn't see the forest. He couldn't also admit, because remember, so they got to be right at all costs. He couldn't also admit there was something feeding into that. See, nothing just happens in life. And you can't talk about young black men killing each other in the hood without talking about the system and what the system has done to black people like no other in this country. And what we've had to do to survive that. And we paid the price. But it all had to do with economics. And it still does. That's the piece that this young, intelligent young man was missing. So now he's got one side loving him. Because I think I had said to you in the beginning, the slave owners in the beginning were paranoid once slavery ended that these black people are now going to turn on us and do what we did to them. But we don't think that way. Most of us. We like think we live on a higher level. We're very godly people. If you just look at our history. So they're still paranoid over that. Because it's about the money and power. And you know how it is. Once you got your claim, once you got what your money and all that stuff and everything, and you got control of things, you don't want things to get upset. It's like your kid. Your kid gets older, he's living in the house, you tell him, nah, you ain't taking over here. You go get your own house, right? Or your own place. You make your own rules. You see? So they weren't giving up that money and power. People just don't do that. So this is where we had the reparations and all the stuff that's been going on and everything. So it really has fueled this conservative movement because there's a lot of people, white people in this country, who believe this narrative that blacks, most of us, are just lazy, ungrateful, and unaccountable people, all this stuff. And I got my close friends around, and we have these conversations. And one of them's a conservative, the other one's a liberal, and I'm neither. And we talk about this stuff all the time. So I know this is a hot conversation for a lot of people to have or to hear, that it's not about the color of skin. It's about economics. See, because here's where we're getting to with Martin Luther King, what I was talking about. I got off a little bit about it. Please forgive me. Let me share my screen. Now you look at this here. It says, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I fear I am integrating my people into a burning house. A lot of people don't know what that's got to do with. I didn't either at one time. Here's what this has got to do with. Like I said, when the civil rights movement came about, here you have Martin Luther King. It's all about economics. Martin Luther King was smart enough, and that's why a lot of times I'll call him a communist. He's been labeled that in a lot of ways by white supremacists, because he was smart enough to know the only way that I'm going to win this fight for equality for all people and not just my people is going to be through the labor unions. Because the labor unions had power. Remember, labor is power. That's where the slaves came in, right? The South wouldn't have had the power if it wasn't for the labor of the black people. So he knew that. So he got the labor unions to cooperate. And that's the boycotting and all that stuff came into play because it choked the finances. Here we go. Of the capitalists, the money people in this country. Once again, is this about black and white, Asian and white, Asian and black? What's it about? Money, right? Now, like I told you, Martin Luther King at one point thought it was just about equality, not for the color of the skin, but the content of the character. The reason why he's known for this quote is because once he won supposed civil rights movement and got the integration of blacks into the rest of society, of white society, real problems became. Because I don't care who you are, every culture has their wealth base. If you go into the inner cities, you go into the cities, you see Italian sections, you see Irish sections. I'm in Massachusetts. So if I go into the city of Boston, there's Italians, Irish, Polish, Portuguese, whoever. Their economic sense ages. You know the ones that really don't have that? Black people. Let me tell you why. And I owe this to Dr. Claude Anderson. He wrote the book Power Now, but he also another book about Black History Reader. And he worked for the government under Jimmy Carter administration, I think. He explained this very well to me. He said that the mistake that MLK made was that he thought integrating blacks into white society was a good thing to do without making sure blacks had their own independent base. And that's the piece that Charlie Kirk missed. He's right on some level when he said that blacks need to be more accountable, but he wasn't right by just saying that. See, that creates rhetoric. That's the difference between rhetoric and actual knowledge and education. Because you got to provide context. And he wasn't doing that. He was just prove me wrong. That was the whole game. He didn't realize he's 31 years old. He had the intelligence, but he didn't have the wisdom. He didn't have the experience. And he had the wrong people as the extremists supporting him, cheering him on. So we integrated without maintaining our financial independence. Because we had black businesses, we had all that stuff in the neighborhoods and all that stuff and everything, which is a healthy thing. That way, because money talks in this country, money and power. So because you look at someone like the Asian culture, they're some of the wealthiest in the country, and they're a small group. Why is that? Because they understood that. Get their economic base, right? Then come to the table and negotiate. Because you go to the table, you're going to negotiate, and that's what we didn't have. You see? And that built up resentment amongst whites. And that's where we had the whole busing integration, all the fights and all the stuff that took place. So here we have it. That's why he said, I fear I'm integrating my people into a burning building, because he didn't realize till afterthought. It's like say hindsight 2020. You know, it's 2020 now. Because I didn't know, because once you solve one solution, as we know as entrepreneurs, you create another problem you got to fix. That's what entrepreneurs do. We fix problems, right? Where everybody else just mask them and shortcuts them and all that stuff. That's why our healthcare system's falling apart, because we think we're going to have health by dishing out drugs. Yeah. But here we have it. Martin King is realizing that was a mistake. And that's when he created that called the Poor Man's March. He realized at that point in time, this is an economic problem, really. This isn't a cultural problem. See, they want to sell to you as a cultural problem because that's how they keep the divide. That's how the devil works. It's divide and conquer. They say, we'll create this distraction over here with our left hand so you won't see what our right hand's doing. Because they know people love all that stuff. You see? And they think it's about black, white, age. No. It's about economics. Okay? So once MLK started messing with people's pockets in a serious way, now he wanted money from the system. Guess what happened? That's when he got a bullet, just like Kirk just got the bullet. Okay? I hope that's clear to you. Like I said, you don't have to agree with me. You can just take it, whatever I suggest you take it, roll around your head, and then throw it off if you want to after. You can say, I'm full of it, whatever. That's that part of the story. Now let's go to this part of the story. Now, many of you, I've told you that I used to be an official Rich Dad Cash Flow Club leader. Many, many years. Robert Kiyosaki wrote the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. Love that guy. And I don't agree with everything he says, but I like him. Like he's a big fan of Trump. Whatever. Hates Biden. I'm no fan of Biden either, so whatever. But the bottom line is, this is the cash flow game crowd. This is the old version of it. This is the board game. Now to bring this home, what I'm talking about here. Inside the whole concept of the game, inside here, this is called the rat race. Okay. Where you got collecting a paycheck, you got all these other problems that come along with it. You lose money. What the heck else is in here? I can't even remember some other stuff that are in here. But there's a lot of fun stuff in here we deal with, you know, when you come from the middle and poor class. A lot of hassles. You're working for money, you're a slave to money. So you want to get out the rat race, right? Why? Because you want to get out onto the fast track. Because the fast track, that's where your freedom is. You see, you can make all kind of money, get money working for you. You still have things to deal with. You can be divorced, you can have bankruptcy and different things like that. But you go on vacation whenever you want to. You might have a lawsuit along the way. So the whole idea is there's always problems out here too, but there's more freedom out here. Inside here, there's no freedom. A lot of BS. Excuse me. So to bring my point home and what I'm saying to you, Charlie was caught up in the BS, just like MLK. See, because they thought it was a cultural war thing or principles war thing. But all this in here, the Matrix, I call it, was created to trap people. You see? Caught up in BS. And that BS gets you dead. My wife, she says to me, she says, "Oh, it's a shame. I may not agree with everything he said, but it doesn't mean right. It was right for him to die. Has nothing to do with being right or wrong. Nothing. It's got to do with what you attract. And if you want to build wealth, you can't get caught up in the BS. Kirk got caught up in it. MLK got caught up in it. MLK, he began to realize it, and that's when they killed him. Kirk, it was simply he had people who loved him for the BS because of his belief system as well, and he was making money from it and living his dream. But the other side, they weren't happy with it. So guess what they did? They killed him. And I even got another one for you. How does anyone even know whether or not there was a bigger picture going on here? We've got these Epstein files going on. We've got the big, beautiful bill going on. And it's like I told you, it's about economics. And anybody who has power, because when we're talking about the subject of something like white supremacy, we're not just talking about white people. You see, a lot of people think that too. Because a white supremacist can be anybody. Because all white supremacy is, give me the example. You ever see that movie Django? And I think who the heck it was Samuel L. Jackson who played, I think his name was Jeffrey, who played the black slave who was in the house with the master. And he was basically being the enemy of the slaves as well, trying to control them because he didn't want to mess up his good living. So he's willing to sell out his own people. That's like the lowest of the lowest. But Samuel Jackson played a good role with that. If you ever want to see that, it's the movie Django. But you got plenty of people who are black, Asian, whatever, who support white supremacy. Why? Because white people run this country, and they have a lot of power in this country. So you don't bite the hand that feeds you, right? Logically, makes sense. So they're gonna go along with those policies because they're trying to get up, and that happens. Just human beings. So don't think this whole white supremacy thing is, oh, white people. No, they believe that it's better for white people to be the supreme ones and not whoever. And who is supreme, to be honest with you? It's not really about that. It's just about doing the best we can as human beings to progress everybody. And that's why I love Bitcoin. Because for the first time in history, you have the chance to create as much wealth as possible in this country, another level of wealth where it gets spread out amongst more people instead of poverty. Who wouldn't want that? I'm not saying that's what's going to happen because there's no guarantees, but it's high probability that that's what can happen so far. Because let's just take it as a game. You're in this matrix and you got culture wars, you got bad debt, you got greedy corporations, you've got prisons, you got inner city ghettos, you got low wages, you got jobs that suck, you've got so many things that cause so many problems that people get so caught up in. How could they even think about building wealth? All they can think about is what someone like Charlie Kirk is saying. Because they're so busy working to catch a highlight on TikTok or the gram or wherever, and him saying blacks need to get their act together, or people who have abortions are murderers and we got to stop that, without thinking also what the cause of that could be other than just people wanting to be murderers and kill babies. People take the shortcut. They get time to think critical about these things. And it feeds them. Then you get the ones on the other side who are angry over that because they're already hurt. Something's going to give there. And I'm afraid what killed him was racism, meaning that the gap between the have and the have-nots is getting wider and wider because of all this rhetoric going on both sides. Okay. I mean, I just heard Trump yesterday condemning the left, the radical left. Like he ain't radical on the right. All these problems. You see what I mean? It feeds a narrative. It divides. And then people start saying, I don't have enough over here. And you've got all this over here. And now it becomes a game of scarcity. There's not enough to go around. So someone's got to go. You know who wins in that? The people who are running this system. See, but when you get out here, the cash flow, you can run a little freer. And like I said, I'm not saying you don't have problems, but you can get out here and run a little freer. Because you don't have to get as much caught up in that mess if you don't want to. You can if you want to. A lot of wealthy people get caught up in politics because they like the game. Because they're afraid. See, I'm not afraid worrying about someone getting more money than me. Because that's a sign of poverty. Because I told you, you don't build wealth through money. You build it through your mentality. And you can be wealthy whether you have a lot of money or not, because wealth really has nothing to do with how much money you got in your bank account. And in actuality, the less money you need in your bank account, the wealthier you are, but we're not going to get into that today. What you need to understand is you have a choice. You can feed into this whole thing with Kirk. This due to culture wars and sick people on the left or the right or whatever. Or you can just deal with the reality. It's about money and power at the end of the day. All this other stuff is just fueling it. But if we want to get right down to the core of it, what's really down in there, what's really happening, it's about the cash flow. Okay. And once again, that's why I'm big on Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has the potential to take this incentive away of people fighting over money and power. You go over to Ukraine and Russia, what's that about? Ain't about different cultures. It's about money, power, land. You go over to the Middle East. You think that's about culture? Nah. That's about land, money, and power, especially oil. They'll sell it to you that it's about culture. But at the end of the day, it's about cash flow, baby. That's what it's about. That's all I see. Okay. I'm not saying there's people out there don't hate people from other different cultures, because that's what they got bred on. That's what they got taught. That's what Charlie Kirk got taught. Kirk got taught, okay? Because he didn't know. I truly believe he believed what he was saying. And I'm sure he thought he was doing the right thing. But once again, it's all about our energy, people. It's all about our walk. And you can only attract the way you think. And listen, I'm sure I know a lot of times social media and I put stuff out there. I have these crazy people saying these crazy things that I didn't even say, because that's how they're interpreting things. So when they get too crazy with me and they put stuff on my posts and stuff that's kind of crazy, they get rid of them. I don't even get into a conversation with them, because you just undermine my power. I don't mind people having an opinion about something, and I try not to knock people for their opinion. I try to respect people's opinions and just leave it at that. But like I said, Kirk, he was debating and people were baiting him in to do that, and he was baiting other people in to do that about some pretty lightning rod things that people have died over in the past for. And if you think you're going to be cute and you're going to be on social media and you think it's not going to bring out these extremists, these narcissists who are going to say, well, I'm going to get a gun and I'm going to end this guy because he's one of the problems, they're causing problems in this world, in this life, and I'm going to kill him. And that's exactly what happened. Just like they did to MLK. And people, oh, geez, he was just sharing his thoughts. The thoughts that he was sharing, everybody didn't love. And everybody and other people found very offensive. I can tell you honestly. Hell, he's talking negatively about MLK like he was dirt. How do you think that's gonna make me as a black person feel? How he feels about me? I'm nowhere as the man that MLK was. Nowhere. I can admit that all damn day long. What do you think people gonna think of you? You're gonna have people gonna love you because they believe like him, and you're gonna have the ones who are gonna hate you and want to get rid of you. Everybody's not gonna be like me. Thank God the majority of people I believe are like me. We can have rational thoughts about things. Now these people going around talking about how this world's falling apart, the United States and everything. Listen, it's happened before in this country, people. Keep your head on. You're just getting another lesson. Different time. Because you ain't learned the lesson not the first time. Go back in history and you see this stuff is repeating itself again. You think we didn't have white supremacists before? You think we didn't have liberalism before? And people getting shot and killed and all this stuff? Come on. Once again, you got to ask yourself, why is this happening? And here's something that I learned very interesting studying. What religion is that? The one that they said Tom Cruise is part of it. My seat's sinking here. I gotta get a new seat. Yeah, excuse me. See my seat here shrinking. Um, what is the name of that religion? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it. But anyhow, Scientologists. I learned something from them. And one of the things that they teach is that anytime you see two sides going at it, there's a third behind party, usually behind the scenes causing it. Okay? Think in your own life. You know, maybe you've had a girlfriend or a boyfriend, right? And y'all arguing about something. And then you got the friend telling you, well, they shouldn't have done this or they did that or whatever. You're right, but they're stirring the pot for whatever reason. Or you're negotiating a deal with somebody else. And then they go to their advisor and they say, no, you know, but they're stirring the pot. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. But always remember, we got this division going on, culture wars, whatever. Someone's stirring that pot. And they're stirring it for the reason you think they're stirring it for. And usually what it comes down to is money. And me as a believer, and I don't know if yeah, not pushing religion, but there's a thing called spirit of mammon in the good book. And look it up. Spirit of mammon is a spirit. It divides and conquers people through the fear and greed over money. And I think that's what you got going on, and that's why I believe ultimately this is why Kirk was assassinated. So I'm going to leave it at that, cash flow creators, and look forward to talking again. But you can leave your thoughts, what you're thinking, and you know you have a business and you want to improve your cash flow. You can go right over to. I always forget my link because I just get started with this channel. Obviously, well, my wife's home. Um, and it's gonna make sure it's the right link. Do this phrasing. Yeah, it's bizcashflowscore.com, and you can check this out, and it will help you to improve, hopefully, your cash flow. Give you a better idea of how you can go about doing that. How's that? It really, that's all I have for today. So I will be talking to you again soon. You know, I appreciate you guys taking the time, but like I said, leave comments too. You know, if you want to, I'd like to hear, interested to see how your thoughts are on this, how you feeling about things. I know a lot of people going through a lot of stress with all this stuff right now, but we really got to gain a better, I believe, a better perspective. The only way we can do that is seeing the other side of things, and I believe that's the mistake that Kirk made, was that he could only see his side of it as an extremist, and he couldn't see the other side of it, and the vice versa. And this is the problem that we have. We have to be able to see both sides of things, because the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. So instead of coin, there's not just two. How many sides? There's three. Where's there's the edge? Because when you stand on the edge, you can see both sides. But you're on one side of it, you can't. And that can make life very horrific for a lot of people.